AITA for refusing to split my inheritance after discovering what my cousin did for years? The banker's hands were shaking when she slid the folder across the desk. Mr. Westbrook, I need you to understand. These withdrawals weren't authorized by your grandmother. Every single one was fraudulent. I stared at the highlighted transactions, each one dated, time-stamped, amounts ranging from $800 to $5,000. 73 withdrawals over 4 years. I did the math in my head 3 times before I could speak. That's $186,000, she nodded. Your cousin Nathaniel had power of attorney. He used it to systematically drain your grandmother's accounts while she was alive. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Outside, traffic moved normally. People were buying coffee, checking their phones, living regular lives. Meanwhile, I was learning that the person I'd grown up with, the one who'd cried at Gran's funeral 3 months ago, had spent years stealing from her while she slowly forgot her own name. I'd been managing Gran's estate sale for 6 weeks when Nathaniel first mentioned splitting the inheritance. We were standing in her kitchen, sorting through decades of accumulated cookware, when he brought it up with this casual lightness that should have been my first warning. You know, legally, everything goes to you since you were her primary caregiver, he said, wiping dust from a Dutch oven. But that doesn't seem fair, does it? We both loved her. I'd looked at him, my cousin, my childhood best friend, the guy who'd taught me to ride a bike when I was 7 and felt guilty for even having sole inheritance rights. Gran had left me everything in her will because I'd moved in with her during her final 3 years, managing her medications, driving her to appointments, sleeping in the guest room to make sure she didn't wander at night. Nathaniel lived 2 hours away in Richmond. He visited monthly, always bringing flowers, always staying for dinner. He'd seemed like the good grandson, too. We can figure something out, I told him that day, meaning it. He'd smiled, squeezed my shoulder, and helped me pack another box. The estate was worth approximately $340,000 after selling Gran's household. A modest 3-bedroom in a good school district that had appreciated steadily over 40 years. Her savings accounts held another $60,000 or so, I'd thought. The lawyer handling probate, a sharp-eyed woman named Diana Frost, who'd been practicing estate law for 23 years, had advised me to conduct a full financial audit before distributing anything. Your grandmother had dementia, she'd said during our first meeting. People with cognitive decline are prime targets for financial exploitation, even from family. Especially from family. I'd nodded, thinking she was being overly cautious, maybe even cynical. Gran had been sharp until her final year. She'd managed her own accounts until age 84. Nathaniel had only gotten power of attorney to help with bills when her memory started failing. He was helping her, I'd thought. He'd told me he was helping her. The audit request went out on a Monday morning in late September. I remember because I'd taken the day off work specifically to handle estate business. Sitting in Gran's kitchen, or my kitchen now, technically, with spreadsheets and bank statements covering the table. My phone rang at 10:15 a.m. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. Mr. Westbrook, this is Rebecca Okonkwo from First National Bank's Fraud Investigation Unit. We need to discuss some irregularities in your grandmother's accounts. The way she said irregularities made my stomach drop. What kind of irregularities? I'd asked. The kind that require an in-person meeting, she'd said. How soon can you come in? I was there within an hour, still wearing my Saturday jeans and an old college sweatshirt, completely unprepared for what she was about to show me. The conference room had windows overlooking the parking lot. Rebecca was young, maybe early 30s, with the kind of professional demeanor that comes from delivering bad news regularly. She had 3 folders. The thickest one was mine. She walked me through it methodically. Nathaniel had been added to Gran's checking account as a joint holder in March 2020, right after her dementia diagnosis. Legitimate, legal, done with her consent, or at least her signature. The problem started 6 months later. Small withdrawals at first, $500 here, $800 there, always listed as household expenses or medical costs. Then they escalated. By 2022, he was pulling $3,000 to $5,000 monthly, timing the withdrawals to just before Gran's pension deposits hit. He was essentially stealing her income, Rebecca explained, highlighting another cluster of transactions. She lived on roughly $3,200 a month from Social Security and her pension. He was taking nearly all of it. The only reason her bills got paid was automatic withdrawal from a separate account he didn't have access to. I felt my face go hot, then cold. How did she buy groceries? How did she eat? Rebecca's expression softened. According to our records, you were added as an account holder in January 2022. Your deposits start appearing regularly after that. Were $400 to $600 weekly. I had been buying her groceries, paying for her medications, covering her utilities when the bills seemed too high. I thought she was just bad at budgeting in her old age, her pension not stretching like it used to. I'd never questioned it. There's more, Rebecca said, and I genuinely didn't think I could handle more. She opened the second folder. Credit cards. 3 of them, all opened in Gran's name between 2021 and 2023. All showing Nathaniel as an authorized user. He'd maxed them out $18,000 on one, $12,000 on another, $9,000 on the 3rd. The purchases were detailed in the statements: home improvement supplies, electronics, a riding mower, furniture, a weekend trip to Myrtle Beach. Your grandmother never owned a riding mower, I said numbly. Her yard was 30 square feet of grass. Rebecca nodded. The billing address on all 3 cards is your cousin's address in Richmond. The room felt too small. I stood up, paced to the window, stared at people loading groceries into car trunks. Normal people doing normal things. How much total? I finally asked. Rebecca consulted her notes. Between unauthorized withdrawals and fraudulent credit accounts, approximately $223,000 over 4 years. The bank is pursuing criminal charges. We wanted to inform you as the estate executor before that process begins. My hand found the window ledge. I gripped it until my knuckles went white. I called Diana Frost from the parking lot, sitting in my car with the engine running because I couldn't process what to do next. She answered on the first ring. Calm estate lawyers don't really have off hours. The bank found fraud, I said, and my voice sounded strange, distant. Nathaniel took over $200,000 from Gran while she was alive. There was a long pause. I'm going to need you to come to my office immediately with all documentation. Don't contact your cousin. Don't discuss this with any other family members. Do you understand? I understood. I drove to her office in a daze, running red lights I didn't register until hours later. Diana's paralegal, a meticulous man named Gordon Cheney. No, I need to avoid that name. I'll call him Gordon Fuller. Waited in the conference room with a recording device and blank legal pads. For 2 hours, I recounted every interaction with Nathaniel over the past 4 years, every conversation about Gran's finances, every time he'd mentioned helping with her bills. Diana took notes in shorthand, occasionally stopping me to clarify dates or exact phrasing. Did he ever show you documentation of these household expenses? She asked. I shook my head. I trusted him. He's my cousin. We grew up together. Diana's pen paused. That's exactly what makes this type of fraud so effective. He exploited your trust and your grandmother's vulnerability simultaneously. She pulled out a legal pad covered in calculations. Based on what you've told me, your grandmother's actual estate value should have been approximately $563,000. The house value, plus what should have been in her accounts, plus appreciation on investments she'd made decades ago that were liquidated without proper authorization. The number hit me like a physical blow. Gran should have died comfortable, secure, with enough to leave something meaningful to her family. Instead, Nathaniel had stolen her dignity along with her money, leaving her dependent on my weekly cash infusions to survive her final years. The rage came then, white-hot and clarifying. Nathaniel called me that evening. I was back at Gran's house, sitting in the kitchen where we'd packed boxes together 6 weeks earlier, staring at my phone as his name appeared on the screen. I let it ring 4 times before answering. Hey, man, he said, voice cheerful. Casual. Just checking in. How's the estate sale going? Made any progress on that inheritance discussion? I closed my eyes. Diana had been explicit. Don't confront him directly. Let the authorities handle it. Preserve the investigation's integrity. But hearing his voice, so normal, so friendly, asking about splitting money he'd already stolen, something in me cracked. The bank called me today, I said quietly. Silence. Then, what bank? First National. Their fraud investigation unit. They wanted to discuss the $186,000 you withdrew from Gran's checking account without authorization. The silence stretched longer this time. When Nathaniel spoke again, his voice had changed, gotten tighter. That's ridiculous. I had power of attorney. Everything I did was legal. Power of attorney doesn't grant you permission to steal, Nathaniel. It makes you a fiduciary. You violated that trust. I was helping her. Do you know how expensive her care was? Someone had to manage her finances. His voice was rising now, defensive. I have the receipts, I said. Every withdrawal, every credit card you opened in her name, every purchase delivered to your address. The riding mower you bought while Gran was eating canned soup for dinner because she couldn't afford groceries. The beach vacation you took with money you stole from a woman with Alzheimer's. I heard him breathing, fast and shallow. You don't understand. The family was supposed to help support her. I had expenses. I have kids to raise, a mortgage. You stole from your dying grandmother. The words came out flat, factual. And now you want me to split what's left of her estate with you, like you didn't already take your share and everyone else's. He hung up. I sat there holding the phone, shaking so hard I had to set it down. The police became involved 3 days later, when First National formally filed their fraud report with the county prosecutor's office. Detective Leonard Graves, a 21-year veteran of the Financial Crimes Division, contacted me on a Friday morning. He had the kind of voice that suggested he'd seen everything twice and wasn't impressed by any of it. Mr. Westbrook, I need to take your statement regarding financial exploitation of an elderly person. This is now a criminal investigation. We met at the station. The interview room was exactly like you'd see on TV above our gray walls, table bolted to the floor, camera in the corner. Detective Graves was in his 50s, heavy-set, wearing a tie that looked like it had survived 3 decades of police work. His partner, Officer Alicia Diaz, specialized in elder abuse cases. She was younger, sharper, and angrier about what she'd read in the file. "Your grandmother's case is textbook financial exploitation," she told me after I'd finished my statement. "Power of attorney fraud is one of the most common forms of elder abuse, and it's severely underreported because victims often don't realize it's happening or they're too ashamed to admit a family member victimized them." Detective Graves slid a document across the table. "This is a warrant for your cousin's financial records. We're executing it Monday morning. The prosecutor is considering charges of theft by deception, financial exploitation of an elderly person, and wire fraud. Combined, he's looking at 15 to 20 years if convicted." 20 years. I tried to picture Nathaniel in prison and couldn't. This was the guy who'd been best man at my wedding 5 years ago, who'd held my daughter when she was born, promising to be the best uncle ever, who'd driven up to help move Gran to a nursing home consultation when her doctor first suggested it, then convinced us she'd be happier at home with care. Of course he'd convinced us. Keeping her at home meant maintaining his access to her accounts. "What happens now?" I asked. Officer Diaz's expression was grim. "Now we build the case. We'll need you to compile every communication you had with him regarding your grandmother's finances. Texts, emails, recorded conversations if you have them. We'll be interviewing other family members to establish pattern of behavior. And Mr. Westbrook?" She leaned forward. "He's going to contact you. He's going to apologize, explain, promise to pay it back. Standard script. Don't negotiate with him. Don't accept any money. It compromises the criminal case. Everything goes through prosecutors now." She was right. Nathaniel texted me that night. "We need to talk, please. I can explain everything. I made mistakes, but I can fix this. Don't let lawyers destroy our family over a misunderstanding." I screenshot the message and forwarded it to Detective Graves without responding. The next morning, another text. "I'm getting a payment plan together. I'll pay back every penny. Just tell the bank to drop the investigation. Please, Kevin, I have kids. Think about what this will do to them." I thought about Gran instead. Signing power of attorney papers with hands that shook from arthritis, trusting her grandson to protect her. I thought about her confusion when I'd told her bills were overdue, her shame at thinking she'd mismanaged money she'd actually never had access to. I thought about the last year of her life, when she'd started refusing to eat much because she wasn't hungry, which I now realized was her way of stretching food stamps further because Nathaniel had drained her grocery budget. I didn't respond to that text either. The family found out when police executed the search warrant on Nathaniel's home. His wife, Melissa, called me screaming, "What did you do? There are police in my house. They're taking our computers, our phones, going through our financial records. Nathaniel is in tears. How could you do this to your own family?" I'd expected this call, too. Diana had prepared me for it. "Melissa, Nathaniel stole over $200,000 from Gran while she was dying. He used power of attorney to systematically drain her accounts and open credit cards in her name. That's not a family dispute. That's elder abuse and fraud." She was crying now. "He was helping her. He paid her bills, managed her care. He stole her pension and left her unable to buy food. I was the one buying groceries, paying for medications, keeping her utilities on because there was never enough money. There was never enough money because Nathaniel was taking it." The line went quiet, except for her breathing. When she spoke again, her voice was smaller. "He told me the estate lawyer was giving him trouble about inheritance. He said you were being greedy, trying to keep everything. He needed money for legal fees." She trailed off, and I could hear the exact moment she realized what her husband had been doing. "The riding mower," she whispered. "He said his uncle gave him money for our anniversary. The vacation last summer. He said it was a work bonus. It was Gran's money, Melissa. All of it." She hung up. 20 minutes later, my phone exploded with texts from other family members who'd heard various versions of what was happening. My aunt demanded I call off the investigation immediately. My uncle offered to mediate. Distant cousins I hadn't spoken to in years suddenly had opinions about family loyalty and forgiveness. I turned my phone off and drove to the cemetery where Gran was buried. Her grave was still new enough that grass hadn't fully covered the disturbed earth. The headstone was simple granite, her name and dates, the epitaph I'd chosen. "Beloved mother and grandmother, teacher of kindness." I'd paid for it from my savings because the estate was in probate. Now I knew the estate should have been 3 times larger. Nathaniel had stolen not just money but choices or the choice to have a nicer funeral, a better headstone, enough left over to honor her memory the way she'd deserved. I sat there in the grass, not caring that it was damp from morning dew, and told her what I was doing. "I'm not letting him get away with it, Gran," I said to the granite. "I know you'd probably tell me to forgive him, to think about family unity, but I can't. What he did to you, what he stole wasn't just money. He stole your dignity, your final years. I won't dishonor your memory by pretending that's okay." A crow called from a nearby oak tree. Wind moved through the cemetery's old maples. I stayed there until the groundskeeper's truck appeared in the distance, then drove home to face whatever came next. The preliminary hearing happened 6 weeks later on a cold November morning. The courthouse was historic brick, drafty and formal, with wooden benches worn smooth by decades of people awaiting justice. Nathaniel appeared with his lawyer, a criminal defense attorney named Stuart Blackwell, who specialized in white-collar crime. Nathaniel looked terrible, 20 pounds lighter, eyes hollow, wearing a suit that now hung loose on his frame. He didn't look at me. The prosecutor, Assistant District Attorney Jennifer Huang, was 42 years old with a reputation for aggressive pursuit of elder abuse cases. Her opening statement was surgical. Your Honor, the state will demonstrate that the defendant engaged in systematic financial exploitation of his grandmother, Elizabeth Westbrook, a vulnerable adult with documented cognitive impairment. Using power of attorney granted for her protection, the defendant instead conducted 73 unauthorized withdrawals totaling $186,000, opened 3 fraudulent credit accounts totaling $39,000 in debt, and liquidated investment accounts worth approximately $137,000 without authorization or benefit to the victim. The defendant's actions left Mrs. Westbrook financially dependent on other family members for basic necessities during the final years of her life, while he purchased luxury items and funded personal vacations. This wasn't a mistake, Your Honor. It was a calculated, sustained theft from a dying woman who trusted him. Stuart Blackwell tried to paint it as a misunderstanding of fiduciary duty, claiming Nathaniel had made errors in judgment while managing complex finances under stress. The judge, Honorable Patricia Montgomery, 30 years on the bench and notoriously unsympathetic to elder abuse cases, wasn't having it. Counsel, your client didn't make errors in judgment. According to the evidence summary, he made 73 separate decisions to steal from his grandmother. That's not stress. That's intent. She ordered Nathaniel to surrender his passport and set bail at $75,000. I watched him sign paperwork with hands that shook the same way Gran's had when she'd signed away her financial autonomy to him. The irony wasn't lost on me. As we filed out of the courtroom, Nathaniel finally looked at me. His mouth opened like he wanted to say something, but I kept walking. There was nothing he could say that mattered anymore. The extended family fractured completely after the hearing. Thanksgiving was canceled due to circumstances. My aunt sent a long email explaining that until this situation was resolved, she couldn't choose sides and hoped I'd understand. My uncle stopped answering my calls. Nathaniel's sister, my cousin Amber, left a voicemail calling me vindictive and cruel, saying I was destroying lives over money that wasn't even mine to begin with. That last part haunted me for days. She was right that the inheritance wasn't mine in some cosmic sense. It was Gran's money, meant to provide security in her old age and perhaps leave something for future generations. But Nathaniel had stolen it while Gran was alive, taking not future inheritance, but present survival resources. The distinction mattered legally and morally, even if Amber couldn't see it. The isolation was crushing in a way I hadn't anticipated. I'd prepared for legal battles, family anger, even threats. I hadn't prepared for the loneliness of being right, while everyone else chose to believe the comfortable lie that this was about greed rather than justice. Diana Frost called me into her office in early December with news about the civil case we'd filed parallel to criminal prosecution. The forensic accountant finished his analysis, she said, sliding a bound report across her desk. He traced every dollar Nathaniel withdrew or charged to accounts he controlled. The news is both better and worse than we thought. I braced myself. Tell me. Your cousin was more sophisticated than typical power of attorney fraud. He didn't just take money, he laundered it. Cash withdrawals were deposited into personal accounts, then used to pay his mortgage, car loans, his children's private school tuition. Credit card purchases were for items he immediately resold online or through pawn shops, converting traceable fraud into untraceable cash. The forensic accountant, Bill Thompson, 26 years in financial investigation, estimates Nathaniel successfully laundered and spent approximately $198,000. The remaining $25,000 is recoverable from current accounts and assets. But everything else is gone. Gone. I stared at the report's executive summary, at charts showing money flowing out of Gran's accounts like blood from an open wound. So even if we win the civil case, we recover maybe 10%? Diana nodded. Criminal restitution might require him to pay back the full amount, but that would likely be a payment plan spanning decades, assuming he maintains employment after a felony conviction. The practical reality is that most of that money is unrecoverable. What about his assets? His house, cars? Mortgaged beyond current value. His wife has already filed for divorce and is claiming innocent spouse protection on their joint assets. It's a mess, Kevin. A financially devastating mess for everyone involved. I thought about Gran's modest dreams, our money for her great-grandchildren's college funds. Maybe helping me with a down payment on a bigger house when my daughter got older, security and dignity in death. All of it converted into Nathaniel's lifestyle inflation, into private school tuition and vacation photos on Facebook, into a riding mower for a yard he barely used. Proceed with everything, I told Diana. Criminal and civil. I don't care if we recover nothing. I want it on record what he did. I want it documented so thoroughly that no one can ever claim this was a misunderstanding or a family dispute. He stole from a dying woman. That needs to be legally established fact. Diana studied me for a long moment. You understand this will cost you. Financially, emotionally, socially. The family will never forgive you for pursuing this. You'll win the case and lose relationships permanently. I'd already lost Gran. Everything else was secondary. The trial began on a gray Monday in February, 14 months after Gran's death. The courtroom was larger than the one used for preliminary hearings, wood-paneled and solemn, with a jury box that somehow made everything feel more real and more surreal simultaneously. I sat behind the prosecution table, watching 12 strangers take their seats to judge my cousin based on evidence I'd helped compile. AITA Jennifer Huang's case was methodical and devastating. She started with Gran's medical records, establishing the timeline of her dementia diagnosis and cognitive decline. Dr. Michael Hartley, the neurologist who'd treated Gran, testified about her diminishing capacity to manage complex financial decisions. By late 2020, Mrs. Westbrook required assistance with financial planning, he stated. She understood basic concepts but couldn't track multiple accounts or detect fraudulent activity. She was precisely the type of vulnerable patient these power of attorney protections are meant to serve. Then came the financial evidence. Rebecca Okonkwo from First National Bank walked the jury through each unauthorized withdrawal, explaining how Nathaniel had exploited his access. The pattern is clear, she testified. Withdrawals consistently occurred just before Mrs. Westbrook's pension deposits, maximizing the amount available to take while leaving minimal funds for her expenses. This required planning and knowledge of her account cycles. Bill Thompson, the forensic accountant, was devastating. He'd created visual aids, ledger charts showing money flowing out of Gran's accounts and into Nathaniel's, timelines matching his purchases to her withdrawals, comparison graphs of her declining account balances versus his increasing lifestyle expenses. The defendant spent his grandmother's money on luxury items while she relied on her grandson Kevin's charity for necessities, Thompson testified. Bank records show Kevin Westbrook deposited approximately $31,000 into Elizabeth's accounts over 3 years to cover her living expenses. During that same period, the defendant withdrew $186,000. The jury took notes. Several looked disgusted. Stuart Blackwell tried to poke holes in the prosecution's case during cross-examination, suggesting Gran had verbally authorized the withdrawals, that Nathaniel had genuinely believed he was managing expenses on her behalf, that the family had an informal understanding about supporting her care. But he couldn't explain the credit cards, the riding mower, the vacation charges. He couldn't explain why Nathaniel had never mentioned these expenses to me during the years I was supplementing Gran's grocery budget. The defense's case lasted 2 days. Nathaniel took the stand, which his lawyer had clearly advised against based on the panic in Stuart's eyes when his client insisted. Nathaniel's testimony was a disaster. He claimed Gran had told him to use whatever you need, that she'd wanted to help him provide for his children. When Ada Huang asked why he'd never documented these verbal authorizations, he stammered. When she asked why he'd concealed the withdrawals from other family members, he had no good answer. You never mentioned to Kevin that you were taking thousands monthly from your grandmother's accounts, correct? Huang asked. No, it didn't come up. It didn't come up during the years he was buying her groceries and paying her utilities because she claimed to have no money. I didn't know he was doing that. You didn't know your grandmother was struggling financially while you were withdrawing her entire monthly income. Nathaniel's face flushed. I was under a lot of stress. I wasn't thinking clearly. For 4 years. You weren't thinking clearly for 4 consecutive years? He had no response. The jury's expressions said everything. The verdict came back after 11 hours of deliberation. Guilty on all counts. Theft by deception, financial exploitation of an elderly person, wire fraud for the electronic transfers. Nathaniel stood rigid as the judge polled the jury, his lawyer's hand on his shoulder. I felt no triumph, no satisfaction, just a heavy, exhausted relief that the truth was now legal record. Judge Montgomery scheduled sentencing for 6 weeks later. Nathaniel was remanded to custody pending sentencing, bail revoked due to flight risk concerns. I watched officers handcuff him and lead him away. His wife, a soon-to-be ex-wife, sat in the back row crying. His children, teenagers now, weren't present. They'd been spared seeing their father convicted of stealing from their great-grandmother. Small mercy. Outside the courthouse, reporters had gathered. Financial exploitation of elderly family members had become a hot news topic, and Gran's case had particularly egregious details. I declined to comment, walking past cameras to my car. Ada Huang had warned me that conviction wasn't the end or sentencing, appeals, restitution hearings, civil case continuation, all of it would take years more. I was prepared for that. What I wasn't prepared for was going home to Gran's house that night and finally, completely breaking down. I sat in her kitchen, the same kitchen where Nathaniel had casually suggested splitting inheritance 6 months earlier, and sobbed. Not quiet, dignified crying, full-body sobs that hurt my chest and made breathing difficult. The stress of 14 months crashed down simultaneously. The investigation, the family fracture, the holidays spent alone, the trial preparation, the testimony, the constant weight of being responsible for sending my cousin to prison. Because that's what I'd done, practically speaking. I'd made the choice to pursue this instead of accepting his payment plan offer, instead of quietly settling the civil case, instead of valuing family peace over legal justice. Other people might have made different choices. Probably would have. The path I'd chosen had destroyed relationships permanently, had left Nathaniel's children without a father, had marked me as the family member willing to pursue blood relatives through criminal courts. Some part of me knew with absolute certainty that Gran wouldn't have wanted this. She'd been a teacher her whole life, a woman who believed in redemption and second chances. She'd have been horrified by prosecution, by prison sentences, by family destroying family through court systems. But Gran had also been the woman who'd taught me that stealing was wrong, that betraying trust was unforgivable, that protecting vulnerable people mattered more than preserving comfortable lives. I'd learned those lessons from her. Applying them to her own case was its own form of honoring her memory, even if it wasn't the form she'd have chosen. Sentencing happened on a surprisingly beautiful spring morning, the kind of day that made the courthouse's grimness seem especially stark by contrast. Judge Montgomery had read the pre-sentencing reports, heard victim impact statements, reviewed Nathaniel's tearful allocution where he apologized to everyone except the person he'd actually harmed. "Mr. Westbrook," she began, and I realized with surreal detachment that she was addressing both of us. Cousin and victim, same last name. "You were entrusted with your grandmother's financial well-being during her most vulnerable period. You violated that trust systematically, repeatedly, and callously. This court finds no evidence of remorse until prosecution became inevitable. No attempt at restitution until criminal charges were filed, no acknowledgement of harm beyond what was unavoidable. The pre-sentencing report notes that you maintain you were helping your grandmother, despite evidence you left her destitute. She sentenced him to 12 years in state prison, with possibility of parole after 8. The courtroom erupted. Nathaniel's family members shouted that it was too harsh, that the judge was destroying lives over money. My aunt called out that I should be ashamed. Security removed several people. Through it all, Judge Montgomery remained unmoved. This sentence reflects the severity of financial exploitation, the vulnerability of the victim, and the calculated nature of these crimes. Court is adjourned. The civil case settled 4 months later. Nathaniel's assets were liquidated, ours, the house sold. Vehicles surrendered, bank accounts emptied. The total recovery was $38,000, roughly 17% of what he'd stolen. The rest was designated as criminal restitution, which meant Nathaniel would be making nominal payments from prison wages, approximately $40 monthly, for the rest of his life. Diana Frost calculated that at that rate, full restitution would take 383 years. "It's symbolic," she explained. "The judgment establishes moral and legal debt even if practical recovery is impossible. When he's released, if he ever earns significant income, those wages can be garnished. The debt follows him." I signed the settlement papers in her office on a humid afternoon in August, nearly 2 years after Gran's death. The $38,000 would be donated to an elder advocacy nonprofit that fought financial exploitation. I didn't want it. Using stolen money felt like perpetuating the violation. Diana understood without my explaining. "Your grandmother would be proud of that choice," she said, and I appreciated the lie. I sold Gran's house the following month. Keeping it had seemed important initially, maintaining her home, preserving her space, honoring her memory through physical location. But living there had become haunted in ways that had nothing to do with ghosts. Every room held memories of the years I'd cared for her, and now all those memories were contaminated by knowledge of what Nathaniel had been doing simultaneously. The new owners were a young family with 2 kids. The wife mentioned they'd been looking for a house in a good school district, something move-in ready, exactly what this was. I signed over the deed and keys, took a last walk through the empty rooms, and left without looking back. The sale proceeds, combined with Gran's actual remaining assets, were distributed to charity and her great-grandchildren's education funds, AITA. The future she'd actually wanted her money to serve. My daughter received $15,000 in a college trust fund she wouldn't touch for 16 years. Gran would have liked that, the money finally doing what it was meant to do, helping family without enabling exploitation. The extended family never reconciled. My aunt sends Christmas cards with generic printed messages but no personal notes. My uncle retired and moved to Arizona. I learned this from his Facebook account, not from him directly. Nathaniel's sister Amber blocked me on all social media. Their children, my second cousins, grew up knowing me as the family villain who'd sent their father to prison over money issues, and whatever sanitized version they'd been told. I accepted this. Some bridges, once burned, leave foundations too damaged for rebuilding. I'd made my choice knowing the costs. Living with those costs was the price of pursuing justice over family peace. Most days I believed it was worth it. Some days I wasn't certain. The days I wasn't certain, I visited Gran's grave and reminded myself why I'd done it, not for inheritance money I'd ultimately given away, but because someone needed to say that what Nathaniel did was unforgivable, that stealing from vulnerable elders deserved consequences, that family loyalty couldn't excuse betrayal of the most fundamental kind. 3 years after the trial, I received a letter from Nathaniel. Prison mail, carefully screened, thin paper with typed text. He'd taken a creative writing class, apparently, and his victim counseling program required making amends. The letter was 4 pages of explanation, justification, and eventual apology. He described the financial pressure he'd been under, the stress of raising children, the easy access to Grand's accounts, the gradual justification process that let him normalize theft. "It started with borrowing $500 for emergency car repairs," he wrote. "I fully intended to pay it back, but then there was another emergency, and another, and the rationalizations got easier. By the end, I'd convinced myself I was entitled to it, that I was doing the hard work of managing her care while you just visited and looked good. I was wrong. I know that now. What I did to Gran, to you, to our family, it's unforgivable. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm just asking you to know that I understand now what I destroyed." I read the letter 3 times, looking for something. Accountability without justification, remorse without self-pity, understanding that would feel genuine. It wasn't there, not completely. Too much pressure and circumstances, not enough acknowledgement that thousands of people face financial stress without stealing from dying relatives. I filed the letter without responding. Forgiveness wasn't mine to give anyway. That was between Nathaniel and Gran, whatever form that reconciliation took in whatever afterlife might exist. I remarried 2 years ago. My wife Diane knows the whole story. I told her on our 4th date because anyone serious about me needed to understand the family situation they'd be entering. "So you don't speak to half your relatives because you prosecuted your cousin for stealing from your grandmother?" she'd summarized. "That's correct. And you'd do it again?" I'd thought about it, really thought, imagining different choices and different outcomes. "Yes," I'd finally answered. "I'd do it again." She'd nodded, squeezed my hand. "Good. Anyone who wouldn't isn't someone I'd want to build a life with." We got married in a small ceremony with friends and the few family members who'd maintained contact. My daughter was Flower Girl, scattering petals with serious concentration. No one mentioned Nathaniel or the trial or the family schism. It existed as context, as history that shaped us but didn't define the celebration. I appreciated that more than I could express. The gift of a future that acknowledged the past without being imprisoned by it. Last month, I received notification that Nathaniel had been approved for parole after serving 8 years. He'd completed victim counseling programs, maintained clean conduct, demonstrated remorse to the parole board's satisfaction. He'd be released to a halfway house in Richmond, required to maintain employment and continue restitution payments. The notification asked if I wanted to submit a victim impact statement regarding his release. I declined. The justice system had done what I'd asked it to do. Bach established legal record of the crime, imposed consequences, required accountability. His life after prison wasn't my responsibility or concern. Diana Frost called me when she heard. "How are you feeling about the release?" "Tired," I admitted. "Just tired. I'm glad it happened, glad there were consequences. But I'm tired of carrying this, of being the person defined by prosecuting family. I want to be someone else now." She understood. "You get to choose that, Kevin. The case is closed. The chapter is over. You're allowed to move forward." I'm trying to. Some days are easier than others. My daughter is 12 now, bright and funny and completely unaware that half her extended family considers her father a villain. She knows Gran died before she was old enough to remember, knows there was complicated family stuff afterward, knows some relatives aren't in our lives anymore. When she's older, I'll tell her the full story. The theft, the trial, the choices I made, the prices paid. I'll tell her that doing the right thing sometimes means accepting loneliness, that justice isn't always satisfying, that protecting vulnerable people sometimes requires harming powerful ones. I'll tell her that I'd make the same choices again, even knowing the costs, because the alternative was letting Gran's suffering be erased, her exploitation be minimized, her memory be dishonored. I'll tell her that inheritance isn't about money, Adi. It's about values, about the principles we carry forward from people we love. Gran left me plenty, just not in the form anyone expected. She left me the knowledge that betrayal requires consequences, that vulnerability deserves protection, that family ties don't excuse financial exploitation. Those lessons were worth more than any bank account. So am I the asshole for refusing to split my inheritance after discovering what my cousin did for years? The internet would probably be divided. Half would say I did exactly right, that theft is theft regardless of family relationship. The other half would say I destroyed lives over money, that family reconciliation should matter more than revenge, that I was cruel for prosecuting him instead of accepting his payment offer. Both perspectives have truth. I did destroy Nathaniel's life. Oh, his freedom, his marriage, his relationship with his children, his reputation, his future earning potential. Those destructions were deliberate consequences of choices I made. I could have chosen differently. Many people would have. But I look at my daughter, at the college fund that wouldn't exist without Gran's remaining estate, at the elder advocacy programs funded by recovered assets, at the legal precedent established by conviction, and I know I chose correctly. Nathaniel didn't just steal money. He stole Gran's dignity, her security, her final years of independence. He stole while watching her decline, while attending her funeral, while pretending to mourn. That kind of betrayal doesn't deserve forgiveness wrapped in family loyalty. It deserves exactly what it got: exposure, consequences, and permanent record. Gran taught me that. Her final lesson, delivered posthumously through bank statements and court testimony. I'm not the asshole. I'm her grandson, honoring her memory the only way that mattered, by refusing to let her suffering be erased for the comfort of people who valued family unity over justice. That inheritance, the moral clarity to choose difficult righteousness over easy peace, is the one I'm proudest to have received. Thanks for watching till the end. Make sure to subscribe and like to not miss the next story.